Welcome to our Savvy series. I'm Catherine Magana here with Rachel Ivanovich. And today we're going to have a discussion on the first 90 days after a job change. So when you have a job change, there's a lot of things that you should think about and consider. It's not just the income change. It could be a tax shift, a benefit shift, and a risk shift, and potentially a protection shift. So we're going to kind of have a discussion and kind of talk about the first 30 days, then the 60 and 90 days, and just make sure you're on track. And obviously there's a little bit more to it than just I changed jobs.
And when you first brought up this topic, Catherine, I was kind of confused. I was thinking, okay, is it that I lost my job or is it I got a new job? So I think we're covering a little bit of both.
Yes, absolutely, because it's different. Because some people that perhaps lost a job, they may have severance packages and then they're kind of at a different phase versus somebody that just changed jobs and had that income replacement right away.
Yeah. So let's just jump in and say for the first 30 days when you have a new job.
So at that time, it's important, I think, to look at what's your total compensation.
And it's not just the money.
Yeah. Is it, you have your health benefits, the retirement plans, and
really
then
finding out what you're getting.
Yeah, and the timing. So do you,
the new benefits
the
package.
retirement plan, maybe you don't have access right away, or maybe you get access right away, so you want to make sure you're aware of that.
Investing schedules. You want to know with retirement plans, 401ks, 403bs, or whatever, if there is an employer match, what's the vesting schedule on that?
And then also as you're looking at, are there potential bonuses, and are they going to get paid out potentially the current year or the following year, and just kind of starting to think about what your year looks like with some of the income too.
And one of the really big things that I see all the time when people change jobs is their W-4 changes, and the W-4 is the form that you fill out for your employer to reset your withholding, your tax withholding. And the new one is terrible. I really don't like it. And the payroll tables are antiquated. So when you are filling out your W-4, and if you're married, and let's just say both of you have kind of big incomes, you need to be careful, because if you check married filing jointly and you both have large incomes, you can be under withheld. And so people don't understand that. You can actually, the W-4 doesn't have to reflect reality. It could actually, you can check the single box, even if you're married. And because if you do married filing joint, they don't withhold as much tax. So when you go to file your taxes, you might have a big tax prize.
So it might be a time where you look at, what did you do last year? What are you projecting this year? And is there a change? Because that also might reflect kind of some of the withholding you want to do. Okay.
And I would say call your tax advisor and get some help with it, and or send an email, because it sometimes is just a little bit tricky, because if you have bonuses, those get taxed a little bit differently, not on your tax return, but the withholding is different. So bonuses don't get taxed at a higher rate, but oftentimes your employer will take more money out. So if part of your compensation package is, let's just say you have a flat rate, and then you get a bonus or commission, then you definitely want to make sure that your withholding is structured properly.
So let's talk a little bit about cash reserves and perhaps maybe having to rebuild that. So usually you have 3 to 6 months cash reserves, 3 months if you have pretty steady income, 6 months if your income fluctuates. And so if you had a job where you got let go, so then potentially—
You had to dip into reserves.
Yeah, did you have to dip into reserves, or was there a severance package?
And that's what it's there for,
too. Yeah, for an emergency or if you need it.
Yes.
And so do you need to replenish that now? So you have to think about that. Or if you did do a job change and you didn't really need to dip into your cash reserves, did the new job, are you getting the same amount of income? Is it higher or less? And do you have to dip a little bit into your savings?
There might be new benefit deductibles as well. So maybe if your benefits package changed, that you maybe have to pay higher coinsurance or higher deductibles. So you want to make sure you're revisiting that as well.
And as you mentioned, the benefits, it's, now do you have the HSAs and the FSAs? I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so with different jobs comes either flexible spending arrangement or health savings account. So those are definitely different. And so as you're reviewing your benefits package, you want to be looking at, do they offer both? And you want to know what the differences are between the two. So with a flexible spending arrangement, and sometimes it's called a Section 125 because it's governed by that section in the tax code, you can set aside a certain amount of money to cover certain benefits, and in particular, health benefits. But if you don't use it, you lose it at the end of the year. So you want to be very careful with how much you actually put into your flexible spending account. With a health savings account, you have to have a high deductible medical plan, but if you don't use the money by the end of the year, then it rolls over to the next year. So you definitely want to review, what's available and, what makes the most sense for you and your family.
And not all companies offer both, or
Correct.
so you have to make sure. Look at the benefits. So let's talk a little bit about protection planning. So as you kind of start with a new employer, there could be some opportunities to look at if there's any disability insurance or group life policies, and so kind of looking at what kind of coverage is available to you, or if there's not, then perhaps do you need something things on your own. So then let's kind of talk a little bit about kind of the next phase, which is kind of like the 30 to 60 days.
So you've kind of settled in, you know what your benefits are, you know how much you're getting paid. And so, but a new job can mean maybe you have higher income, and so you have a greater ability to take risks. So you may want to revisit your portfolio and see how you have your assets positioned, because maybe at this point you want to revisit and do things a little differently.
Yeah. Or perhaps, like you mentioned earlier, are there any stock options? And so now is your
that can
equity
present a tax issue?
Well, not only a tax issue, but also the exposure for
yes.
equities and a little more risk.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for instance, maybe now you have an employee stock purchase plan available. Maybe you have restricted stock units or incentive stock options, and those are all taxed differently. So you want to make sure. What I see from a tax perspective is oftentimes if you're receiving RSUs or restricted stock units, people get into trouble with taxes. Yeah. And so you want to make sure that you're working with someone who understands them and make sure that you're planning ahead of time so you don't have a big nasty surprise in April.
I said, you don't want to be blindsided later.
Correct.
That you owe a lot of money from that.
Yeah.
So another thing that comes up is retirement plans. So if your employer offers a retirement plan for you, perhaps maybe it's in the first 60 days or 90 days. If they do, then you want to look at, is there a match? How much are you contributing? What are the investment options that you have access to?
A lot of people get stuck in target funds.
They do, yeah. So we see that a lot. So what happens is some plans automatically, if you don't select different investment options, they'll put you in a target fund, which what they're saying is based on when they think your age and when you're going to retire. And so sometimes that's not the best option. For some, it might be because they're based on how much or what they're starting off with.
You want to look at what all the options are.
Exactly. So that's a good time to kind of look at what's available to you and what's a good allocation for you. Another thing to think about is how about your old 401k with your previous employer? So all plans are a little different, but you do have different options, and this really takes working with an advisor or kind of looking at your options to see what's best for you and your situation. Some plans allow you to leave your retirement plans with the previous employer. However, some plans say you have to be out of the plan within a certain amount of time. And then some plans, if you have a small amount of money, they do a forced kind of getting out of the plan as well. And so that's one thing to consider, is looking at that. Two is if the new plan that you're in, do they allow for rollover to the new plan? So then once again, you have to look at what's in the new plan and does it make sense? Another option is, does it make sense to move it to an IRA where you can not have to pay taxes if you do the rollover to the new employer plan or the IRA? So then at that point you can look at what's best overall investment-wise that kind of tie in with your overall plan, and and you have access to a lot of different investment options.
I think that you definitely need to be careful before you make that determination and look at big picture, strictly because a lot of people really love doing what's called a backdoor Roth.
Yeah.
And a backdoor Roth is if your income is too high, you can't directly contribute to a Roth IRA. And a Roth IRA allows you to save money, basically tax deferred comes out tax free later. But if if your income's too high, you can't directly contribute. But with a backdoor Roth, you can put after tax dollars into an IRA, and then you can turn around and convert it into a Roth. But if you already have let's say
an IRA,
you've rolled your old 401k into an IRA, now that money becomes part of the calculation when you're doing a conversion. So you could have a portion of that rollover and or conversion be taxable, and it's called the pro rata rule. But you just want to be looking kind of long term.
Everything,
and find out, figure out what makes most sense for me. Is this a good move right now? Or
because we've also had some clients over the years that they had 8 different old 401k plans everywhere, and they're just, we helped them consolidate and organize, and because it was just all, it wasn't
all over the place.
Yeah, and so it just depends. Like, once again, it's case by case. The other option with the rollover is potentially, are you taking a distribution or money out of the plan? And once again, there's taxes, and we're not saying yes. And so we're not saying to do that, but we are saying look at that as an option that you have. And so once again, there's a lot of different options you have when you do change companies and seeing what's best. And that's some of the things when we do financial plans and look at, we do evaluate some of those options with our clients.
And oftentimes people forget to update beneficiaries.
Oh, yeah, that's key. It's like, wait a minute.
And this is critical, especially if you have the new 401k, let's say you have new life insurance with your company or a health savings account, because those do accumulate and roll over year over year. Or maybe you have a new brokerage account because maybe you have employee stock options. You want to make sure that you're updating all your beneficiaries.
Well, and then that also ties into if you had an old plan or an old account, and then when you move, you realize, oh, well, maybe I'm married now, or there's something's changed in my life.
Or maybe I got divorced.
Yes, yeah, that too.
You don't want to have outdated ex-spouses on your plan, on your accounts.
Okay, so let's kind of talk about the final phase, the 60 to 90 days, and some things to be thinking about. So obviously, you've transitioned, you're with your new employer, and everything's going wonderful. Everything's wonderful. But then it comes time to, okay, well, maybe it might be a good idea to revisit kind of your estate planning and your documents and make sure everything's in line with what your wishes.
Maybe you actually moved and you moved states. And so all of the tax laws maybe are different. And so you want to make sure that, different states have different rules. For instance, if you're in the state of California and if you have assets over a certain dollar amount, it makes sense to have a trust. But I know that a lot of other states don't have that same rule. So it's definitely important to review the estate planning depending on what state you're in.
And then obviously that ties into if you did move for a job change, obviously the taxes potentially could be different in that state for the state tax. And so a lot of things to consider. I think, obviously looking at, where's your income going to be this year, looking at your benefits, obviously taking time to kind of pause and reflect on, okay, has anything changed in your life? And obviously with a job change is a pretty big move. I mean,
it really is. And honestly, one of the things we didn't mention that actually comes up for me often is when people have changed jobs is, should I be putting money into a Roth 401k or a traditional 401k? And I think it really makes sense. So the Roth 401k you use after-tax dollars, and the traditional 401k is pre-tax dollars with salary deferral. So it really depends on your tax bracket and your overall situation. So that's an area where you definitely want to talk to your advisors.
And for some people, it makes sense. Okay, we'll do part pre-tax and part after-tax if the plan allows it. And so it is. It's something to look, and then you have to also think about the future. Where am I going to be with required minimum distributions later?
Right.
And so there's a little bit of planning that goes along with that. Although, I think sometimes what we hear often is I should do the Roth,
Yes.
But then the reality is, okay, well, they might impact you. Maybe, like I said, maybe it's a combination, or it doesn't make sense. So you just have to look at.
But each individual is different and unique, so you definitely want to look at your situation.
And so I guess it's obviously a good time to look at, are there any debts to pay off? Are you at a good place with your savings? Are you continuing to save, and are you still on track? So I think as you make these big changes, it is important to revisit your overall financial and retirement plan and tax plan and make sure.
Well, because I think it's easy if you get a new job and all of a sudden you have a new big salary that you want, to let that lifestyle inflation happen and you start spending more. Yeah. So maybe wait for 60 to 90 days before you start making big decisions and changing your budget and look at, let's just settle in and decide intentionally about where the money should go.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So I know we covered a lot today. Obviously, a job change is a big life change, and if you have any questions or if you want to consult with us, we're happy to have a complimentary consultation with you or call. And you can reach us at 760-692-5700. That's 760-692-5700. And we want to thank you today for getting savvy with us. And remember to savvy up. Please stay tuned for important disclosures. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results, and the indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. As always, please remember investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional. Savvy Woman Wealth Management is a registered investment advisor with the SEC.